On the afternoon of May 10, 1996, more than 30 climbers stood high on Everest's southeast ridge, some close enough to see the summit, and all of them spending a currency none of them could afford: time. Every step upward was a step they would have to retrace through thinning air, and their oxygen, daylight, and luck were running out at the same rate. The storm that would bury them had not yet arrived. The question is why, with the margin for a safe return already gone, so many of them kept climbing. In the spring of 1996, commercial guiding had turned the world's highest summit into a purchasable dream. Two outfits, Rob Hall's Adventure Consultants and Scott Fisher's Mountain Madness, were leading paying clients up the South Col route, most of them amateurs who had never stood above 8,000 meters. The plan for Summit Day was unforgiving. Leave the high camp near 8,000 meters at midnight, reach the summit around noon, and descend by 6, with a strict turnaround time. Hall called it absolute law beyond appeal. By 2 in the afternoon, anyone still climbing was ordered to turn around, summit or no summit. It was a rule written in the knowledge that on Everest, the summit is only the halfway point. The climbers left the South Col at midnight under clear skies, but the plan began to unravel within hours. Far below the top, Sherpas were supposed to race ahead and fix ropes along the route. Instead, the teams reached the balcony at roughly 5:30 in the morning and found the lines unfinished. Nearly an hour was lost. Then came the bottleneck. More than 30 climbers from several expeditions funneled onto a single route, and at the Hillary Step, a sheer 40-foot wall just below the summit, they queued, motionless, for minutes that became hours. The slowest climber now set the pace for everyone. Some read the clock correctly. Before noon, 3 clients turned back, and they survived, but most did not. They had already spent their margin on a bottleneck no single person had caused, and no one on that ridge had the authority left to give it back. The first summits came after 1 o'clock, and the deadline, whatever it truly was, slid past. The turnaround rule was only as strong as the person enforcing it, and that day the people enforcing it were exhausted, emotionally invested, and at the edge of the world. Rob Hall had a specific reason not to turn his people around. A year earlier, he had forced his client Doug Hansen to turn back just short of the summit, and had watched him weep. Hall had discounted Hansen's fee and all, but guaranteed him the top. Fisher, meanwhile, was climbing sick, and had never set a firm turnaround at all. Every client had paid as much as $65,000 for what might be their only shot. Turn around now, and go home with nothing but a story about quitting. By 2 o'clock, most climbers were still ascending. By 3, Rob Hall stood waiting high on the ridge while Doug Hansen crawled toward him. Hours past the law Hall himself had written. Hall did not send him down. Perhaps he saw the summit. Perhaps he saw a promise he could not break twice. He turned and climbed with him. And at 4 o'clock, in gathering weather, Hansen stood on the summit for the first time. 2 hours past the last safe moment to begin the descent. Scott Fisher reached the top at 3:40, sick and spent, too committed to reverse, too close to refuse the thing he had sold. When Hansen's oxygen ran out, guide Andy Harris, his own mind starved of air, radioed that the full spare bottles below were empty. They were full. The mistake meant no rescue supply was sent up, and nobody on the mountain yet understood that the margin for error was not just small, it was gone. Then, around 5, the storm arrived. In minutes, wind hit 70 miles an hour and the summit vanished in whiteout. Doug Hansen collapsed at the Hillary Step, unable to go down, and Rob Hall stayed with him through the night, refusing to leave. Patched through by satellite phone from base camp, Hall spoke his last words to his pregnant wife. "Sleep well, my sweetheart. Please don't worry too much." Andy Harris walked into the storm and was never found. Scott Fisher collapsed on the descent. His Sherpa, Lop, saying, stayed with him until there was nothing more he could do, then secured his body and descended alone. Yasuko Namba froze a few hundred meters from the tents. 8 people died on the mountain that day and night. Beck Weathers, left for dead twice, somehow stood up the next morning and walked back into camp, his hands and face destroyed. No single broken rule made this happen. 100 small margins, minutes lost to unset ropes, oxygen misread in a hyposic brain, a promise made to a heartbroken client, had quietly added up to 0. Everest did not punish one mistake. It punished the refusal to believe, while the summit was still visible, that the summit was already lost. The hardest skill a climber learns is turning around, because the mountain's deadliest lie is that the top is only a little farther, when the real summit you need to reach is down below, before the weather closes. Above 8,000 meters, the body is already dying. In every choice, there is a negotiation with a closing door. Every climber on that ridge was close enough to see the top. None of them could see what was coming. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and tell us in the comments. Where do you think the real point of no return was?